Hello, folks. Welcome back to Reality Check with Arvind Swaminathan. Well, let's put an end to this this Palestinian-Israeli conflict thing. Let's get to the bottom of it. First, Israel. Do you remember how you got Israel in the first place? Do you remember the terrorist activities you indulged in? Do you remember those terror gangs, the Irgun, the Haganah? One of your former prime ministers, what's his name, Menachem Begin, he was an active member of one of these. And he was an active member in that group which blew up the King David Hotel in 1946. In 2006, Israeli government commemorated that as a heroic event with a plaque. Now here again, double standard. When you do it, it's a heroic act. When the Palestinians wanting their independence and their state do it, it's terrorism. Now come on, which is which? Now we come back to the present day. And remember, you've been doing this terrorism and really hounding the Palestinians out of all parts of Palestine. Ethnic cleansing. Well, there is another word I mentioned in one of my previous videos. Think about it, I said. The word is genocide. That's all. That is what you're indulging in. And the world stands still. The Americans back you all the way. So do the Brits. Well, why do the British and why do the Americans and the French and the Germans, why do they back it? Why do they back you? Well, the reason is quite simple. This, economic. Why? Well, they've been looking for an alternative to the Suez Canal. And remember, Israel has always been trying to get another one parallel to it, away from Arab control. Now, how much does it give in terms of revenue? Ever since Egypt nationalized it, well, 2 years ago, the revenue generated from the Suez Canal was something like $9 billion US dollars, billion with a B. Makes it worthwhile, doesn't it? Now we begin to understand why they want Gaza. You see, from Eilat, the Gulf of Aqaba, they're hoping to cut out a canal all the way up to the Mediterranean, parallel to the Suez Canal. Now, the Suez Canal has a few drawbacks. One, it has a sandy substratum. It needs a lot of maintenance, dredging and so on. Two, the draft, i.e. the depth is only about 50 meters. So the extra large tankers and the big aircraft carriers will find a big problem. Also, it's not very wide. I think 100 meters at its widest. This one, they're trying to make 200 meters wide and about 100 meters deep. Plus, this is on rocky substratum, much less maintenance and therefore a lot safer. But the thing with it is Gaza comes in the middle. Now to go around Gaza, you have to take one 90-degree turn to starboard and then another 90-degree turn to port side, meaning left. That means two 90-degree turns, which make it very inconvenient, especially for the super tankers and the big aircraft carriers and so on. Supposing they could go straight through Gaza, much less distance, much cheaper to build, much more revenue, and much less inconvenience for large ships, really super tankers and things like this. Now you understand what they're up to, what their game is. Coming back to this particular conflict, Israel and Mr. Netanyahu, there's something chronically wrong with you. And all those who support you, Mr. Netanyahu, must take a long, hard look at themselves. Even Mr. Modi. Why? Well, let's see. You claim this is your 9/11. When 9/11, if it is, it means it was a fake attack it was done by you to yourselves. So it would seem. Because that's what 9/11 was. Then don't tell us you didn't know it was going to happen. You did. There's very little that goes on in Gaza that Mossad and your intelligence agencies know nothing about. Almost nothing. Now, Hamas is something you've been shouting from the rooftops. We will get rid of Hamas. There is no such thing. If indeed it exists, it was created by your own predecessor, Ariel Sharon. Why? It was to be a buffer against the Palestinian Authority in the negotiations for peace talks. Remember, there's only one Israeli Prime Minister who is willing to give back land in exchange for peace. And the Palestinians were quite prepared for it. There were one or two sticky points, yes. And then that Prime Minister, Yitzhak Rabin, was assassinated. No more peace process. Because you, Mr. Netanyahu, brag about this, that you sabotaged the peace process, the Oslo Accord and everything else. That was 2/3 of the way to a peace agreement between Palestinians and Israelis. Now then, the other thing which the Palestinians are screaming about and they're hopping mad about, why is there no Palestinian state yet? Because you don't allow it. You keep telling us or reminding us that you are in partition Palestine and you accepted it. Okay, then stay with your 60% of Palestine. The other 40% belongs to Palestinians. Get out of there. 2. Gaza and the West Bank are not part of Palestine then. They've been given to Palestinians, yes. That is theirs. So why are you salami slicing and terrorizing West Bank Palestinians? Why are you bombing hell out of Gaza? Because you want to annex it? For your canal, I think, what is it called? I think you called it the Ben Gurion Canal. After your first Prime Minister, David Ben Gurion. Now you see, again, Hamas, the terror organization, just like Al-Qaeda, a head, an Arab-sounding name, same as Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. And you're telling us, you expect us to believe all this? Now I told you in the previous video, the videos they show about this 5,000 rockets being fired was taken from a video game and so on. The paragliders were shot in Egypt 2 years ago and the missiles being fired were in Syria a few years ago. So where's your evidence? There is none. You claim hostages have been taken by them. Who took them? Hamas did? Palestinians did? Or you're hiding them yourselves? I mean, come on, let's get real. Let's be honest. Let's come out with a little bit of truth rather than the lies you've been feeding us since 1948. I mean, let's get down to brass tacks. Why is there no Palestinian state even though there are UN resolutions? UN is not being allowed to function as it was meant to function. Thanks to you and your lobbying, the Americans are always with you. And you, Mr. Biden, and you, Mr. Sunak, and you, Van Leyen, the head of the EU at the moment, and Mr. Macron, why are you with Israel? You want that canal too. Why? Now the only other reason I can think of is racism. Stark, outright racism. All the others involved in this struggle are Arabs. Therefore they're not white European, except Israelis. 95% of them are Ashkenazis. That means of European origin. They're not Arabs. They're not from here. So what are they doing there? Remember what you white Europeans did wherever you went, en masse. Whether it was the US, Canada, Mexico, South America, Africa, India, Australia, New Zealand, what did you do to the local population? And on top of everything else, Israel, you're operating a very horrendously nasty apartheid regime. Palestinians and Jews just don't mix. The Palestinian is kept aside. And he's being removed from Israel altogether. Why? And you call this a democratic state? And you talk about human rights? And you, Mr. Biden, talk about human rights in China and in India? Come on. It's not double but treble standards and outright racism, nothing else. What else can you say? Is there anything else you can say? No. So when are you going to get real? When are you going to become human? Or must we go on with this belief that mankind has lived for centuries, it is true, and still generals and armies and generals and presidents and kings send their armies to war to impose their will on a hapless, weaker people. Yes, mankind has lived for centuries, it is true, but he has merely grown older. He has not grown wiser. He is still the same as he was 500 years ago. And that goes for you, Mr. Biden. Remember what you did to the American Indian? Well, the Palestinian has been reduced to the status of the American Indian, except this is in West Asia. He's not an Indian or American Indian, he's a Palestinian. But he has the same rights as an American Indian had 200 years ago, which means no rights whatsoever. I mean, it means quite simply this. Israeli Jews have all rights. Europeans have all rights. Americans have all rights, human rights and everything else. But the Palestinian, he's not even a human being. Now, they keep telling us, they're very careful about not doing anything or any harm to civilians. What kind of nonsense is that? You bomb refugee camps in Gaza, shelters, schools, hospitals. What else is there? Where else do they go? You bomb the roads which they're supposed to take out of Gaza, and then you say, we told them to go. Wow. How humane. You told them an hour before, get out, we're going to bomb you. How far do they go? Where do they go? They don't have any water, they don't have any food, they don't have any electricity, they don't have any fuel. So where do they go? Come on. I'm asking you, where do they go? How do they go? On foot? Sick? Aged people? Little kids? How do they go? How many children have you killed? How many women have you killed? It's not just today's Palestinian, but all their future generations as well. Now, if that's not genocide, what is it? Please tell me. Is there any other word for it? No, there isn't. And you tell us that Hamas is harassing you? Hey, come on. Now, there is no Hamas in the West Bank. So why are you removing Palestinians from there? Why are you encroaching in there with more and more Jewish settlements? Having broken up and removed Palestinian settlements. Is that also part of your plan? Kill and or drive out so that they never want to come back, only the remnants. The rest, you don't even want to know where they're buried. There will be no mark anywhere. Gaza is already rubble. We both know that. It's been like that since 1967. And remember in 1967, the whole thing was over in 6 days. Why? Your intelligence had told you. The Arabs weren't even contemplating war. Forget an attack. Not even an attack. They didn't have the means. Your own intelligence told you it would have taken them at least 2 years to prepare for a war against Israel or anybody else. So now it changed from an imminent threat to an opportunity to capture land and hold it hostage. You're talking about 200 hostages or 250 hostages? You got 40% of Palestine as your hostage and everything that lives on it, including the human beings. Now somebody asked an Israeli soldier, what about all the other innocent civilians you killed? He said, supposing I explain this to you. Come with me. He took him along, a whole lot of ants wandering around. And he said, now stand there. Within minutes, the ants crawled up all over him. And then as one or two bit him, he patted them. Now he killed not only those two, but about 30 or 40 others. He said, now, do you know which one of them actually bit you? No, and yet, when you kill them, you killed 30 or 40. That's collateral damage. That's the Israeli way of thinking. Now, it's not just the fact that it's trying to explain something which is indefensible. It gives you their mindset that he, as the Israeli or the man standing there, is a human being. But Palestinians are the little ants. You do them that, no problem. You kill 200 of them, nothing. Talmudic Judaism all over again. Now you begin to understand what the problem is. Now you understand why they assassinated Yitzhak Rabin. Because according to Talmudic Judaism, whatever you have taken, you don't give back. You don't have to give it back. So why did Yitzhak Rabin want to give it back? The fact that there would have been peace doesn't matter. You kill and go on killing. And that, Mr. Netanyahu, has been your mantra all along. No peace, just murder, mayhem. And that's what you're doing. How many Palestinians have you killed in the Gaza Strip? According to present reports, it's more than 10,000. 40%, maybe 50% of those will be children. How many of them are women? Another 25%? That's your future generations of Palestinians being wiped out. And you talk about the Holocaust, but never about the Holodomor. Now, isn't that double or treble or quadruple standards? One standard for yourselves and everybody else, and a third-rate one for Palestinians. They're even less than the American Indians. They're not even human as far as you're concerned. And then you talk to the rest of the world about terrorism. You forget the Irgun and the Haganah and the other terrorist groups. You forget your own past. Or maybe it's all classed as the Holodomor. Never remember. But something done to you, don't forget. Ever forget. So please, Israel, grow up. And you, Mr. Biden, grow up as well as you, Mr. Macron and von Leyen and Mr. Rishi Sunak. If you think money is more important than the whole bunch of millions of Palestinians, then I don't think we have much in common. You are, even though you claim to be of Asian descent, Mr. Sunak, you're behaving like a white supremacist, which means racism all the way, right down to the very core of your heart. I'm sorry. We know that white Europeans are like this, and they've been like this for centuries. And it seems to have got into their DNA. And it's still there. Don't you think it's about time it came out? Now please, there's no humanitarian ceasefire. You talk about humanitarian assistance. How? How does it get through when you're bombing the place? There's no communication. We don't even know where they are. How do we get through to them? When are you going to give Palestinians back their rights? They're 40% of what was Palestine, plus the West Bank and Gaza. Because those weren't even Palestinian, but given to them by two different governments. Now let's get a few things straight. I cannot see you as being human or human partners. I don't understand how any of you or Westerners talk to everybody else about human rights, equality, civil rights. I mean, sheer hypocrisy, nothing else. You telling me that Arabs aren't human? Or non-Europeans are not humans? What about us in India? We're not human? And yet you rely on our doctors and our engineers and our scientists for everything else? Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. We're only there to serve you. We can never be your equals. That's what you're trying to tell us all. This is what we do to non-humans. When are you going to grow up? Israel, America, UK, EU, Germany, and Portugal, Spain, Holland. When are you going to grow up? When can we get to the stage where we can actually say, yes, mankind has lived for centuries, it is true. When can we grow up and say, yes, he has finally grown wiser? Because we're still on the same old rhetoric. He's merely grown older, not wiser. Thank you, folks. We'll think of something else for next time. I don't need to say any more about this the Israel-Palestine conflict, because it smacks of racism. And there's no other word for it. Racism and genocide against the hapless people who have no support from anybody. Why? Because you don't allow it. Well, folks, have a look at this, subscribe, pass it on to your other groups, because this is what is happening in the world. Let's all grow up a little. Otherwise, the world will never be one. And it's not worth being one as second or third class citizens. Well, pass this on to your groups, your friends, relatives, and everybody else. I think we should all know what the world is like at this moment. Bye.